Hi and welcome back to Weeds That Feed. In this week's A Pantry for Wildlife, we're going to be looking at wild parsnip, Pastinaca sativa. I think I said that right. Now, wild parsnip is an amazing looking plant. I'll show you in a minute and compare it to a fennel. It's so similar to fennel, but the leaves are not as feathery. Now, obviously fennel isn't a native plant and wild parsnip is. It actually gets its name from the Latin for food and for sativa, to cultivate that food. So it was used for many years by the Romans as a sweetener, natural sweetener before sugar beet and things like that. And I read that the German tribes used to pay the Romans solely in parsnip. So, some fascinating facts there. What does it do for wildlife? Well, it supports 117 insects. That's 50 phytophagous, plant-eating insects, caterpillars, grubs, that sort of thing, leaf beetles, and many more, aphids, thrips. And it supports 67 pollinating species. I noticed on mine that it has the parsnip webworm, which is a specialist moth, micro moth. It's a micro moth, but it's a pretty big micro moth. So this micro moth is up to about 30 millimeters, which is getting into, that's normal moth, macro moth size territory. Now, you would have thought that micro moths and macro moths were called so because of their size, but they're not actually. It's because of their evolutionary history. So micro moths evolved before macro moths. They happen to mostly be smaller than macro moths, but the old one is a whopper like this one. And what it does is, I'll show you actually. This is the wild parsnip, and you can see its leaves here, which are pinnate leaves, all coming, opposing leaves off a side shoot. Its flowers are very similar to fennel. This is just about ending its flowering and going into seed actually. Now, this webworm, you can see that it's completely actually, I think that's the webworm that's done that on that parsnip, but this definitely is. If it can focus in on this, these, you see in here, there's a web. So trying to focus. Here, let me try a better one up here. This here. There we go. It has a web around it, and that has a caterpillar in it. And that caterpillar creates that web to protect itself, folds in the flower buds and eats those until it's strong enough. Got a wasp on there, look. Won't focus very well, I'm afraid. Never mind. It eats those, and then to pupate, it crawls down the stem. You've got to be really, really careful when you're doing anything with this parsnip, because wild parsnip is incredibly caustic. It's sap, so it has a photodermatose dermatitis reaction. One would have one. So it's not an allergic reaction, it actually reacts with the chemicals in your skin. Anyone who has the sap rubbed on them will, and then go in sunlight, the UV reacts with the chemicals in the sap, and you get a very, very bad burn, and very bad scarring. So you really have to be careful around it. But here, if I can focus in on it, yeah, there we go. That's a hole in there. It's about 3 millimeters wide, and that's where the caterpillar crawls inside. There's more down here. There we go. It crawls inside, and then it will pupate there, and it will come out in autumn and become an adult, say, micromoth, large micromoth, and it will then overwinter in a protected space, nowadays like a shed or something like that, and it will then come out next spring, mate, lay the caterpillars on another wild parsnip, and then the whole thing happens again. So that's exciting. Nature in action. Like my sculpture I just built. It's fun, isn't it? Balancing just by itself with one tiniest nick out of that top bit of wood. Anyway, I digress. But also eats hogweed. Actually, another plant that can give you a photodermatological reaction. But the native hogweed isn't anything like as bad as the giant hogweed, which will give you a burn like parsnip does. But I've certainly never had a burn of hogweed, and I've got tons of it. But excitingly, I also noticed that the parsnip webworm is also eating the hogweed, and it's also can we see that there? If it'll focus, will it focus? Whoop. Well, it's fuzzy, but you might see there in the middle of the shot there is a hole in that stem, and that is where the webworm has entered the stem, and it will safely pupate in there and then come out as an adult in autumn. Now, the wild parsnip also feeds one butterfly, the swallowtail. Where it does exist in Britain, in Norfolk, it eats milk parsley. But on researching ground elder, which has historically been a bit of a pain in this garden over in this border here, it actually eats the caterpillars also eat ground elder. I mean, they're not gonna compete with the kind of vigorousness of ground elder, but exciting to know that it does a good thing. It also feeds 4 macromoths, so the straw bell, the white spotted pug, the triple spotted pug, and the brindled ochre, and a whole bunch of other, how many is that? The 45 more phytophagous insects, 14 flies, and 10 aphids, which are always very often very specific, 10 more micromoths, 5 beetles, 2 thrips, etc. And the nectar feeds 12 bees and 18 hoverflies, plus another 47 pollinators. So what an amazing plant this is. I mean, it looks incredible. It's so statuesque. I think that is at least 8 foot tall. And it looks amazing in the borders. I've got a really young daughter, so I have put it, she's 2.5, and you can see that I mean, it's so tall that you'd want it further towards the middle or back of a border, but I've taken out the ones at the front of the border because I obviously don't want her to pick it and get that reaction. And what else am I going to say? Yeah, it's a biennial, so these have all gone over this year. I haven't seen too many plants coming for next year. These were seeded from a local wild meadow, and I had lots this year, so the likelihood is that probably next year I won't have so many because they'll need to have their vegetative year of growth the first year, and then they will flower the second year. But almost certainly these guys are going to seed, and so in 2028 I'll have a load more. So thanks for watching this week's Weeds That Feed. Do spread the word about our native and older plants of Britain that support lots and lots of species. I've started calling these plants evolutionary partners because it's the grubs and caterpillars and lice and aphids and leaf miners and all these interesting insects that have a very specialist diet, and these ones are the ones that go on to become the beautiful flying butterflies and moths, etc., or beetles, or all sorts of other insects that we admire so much in our gardens. But we can't have these insects without the plants that support their larval stage. So please do keep watching. I will keep learning and reporting on the plants in my garden or in the wild around me. And please also like and especially subscribe to this channel. Thanks again, and I'll see you another time for Weeds That Feed.